Welcome to the Team Teach podcast. I'm Clare, and in each episode you'll find me talking with an expert guest to learn more about behaviour. We squeeze a lot into each episode. You'll listen to the latest thinking in behaviour, continue your professional development with our book recommendation, and then I'll send you away with 3 practical tips you can use in your setting. I'm joined today by Dr Anne Emerson. She is the author of How to Be and Remain a Compassionate Educator, Learning from Neurodivergent Students for the Benefit of All. And today we are talking about the learning from working with dysregulated, neurodivergent children and adults and how this can help us to remain compassionate towards all children. Nice to see you this morning, Anne.
Good to see you too.
I wondered if you could tell the listener a little bit more about yourself. I've done a bit of a reveal of some of your things that you've done, but if you could just talk about your experience a little bit.
Sure. I'm very happy to be invited to the podcast, and I want to start by saying that I trained originally as a speech and language therapist, and after some years working in that field, I felt quite like I wanted to look at the whole child. So I've done a lot of things since that keep taking me kind of broader and broader. So I've worked as a parent and family supporter and advisor. I've worked as a teacher trainer. Then I did venture into teaching without any training in further education, which was a big challenge, but such a learning opportunity. And then after several sideways moves, I became a researcher and an academic. And then in recent times, I decided to train as a counsellor so that I could really try to look very holistically at the whole child or adult, whoever I'm working with.
Yeah, that's a really interesting span across lots of different sectors and models of working. So I think I'm really interested in hearing that holistic approach and all the things really that you've learned. As you know, I know you've listened to some of our podcasts. We do start with a reflective question, which can be a bit tricky and thought-provoking. But I wondered if you could let the listener know what you wish you knew then that you know and know now about this topic.
Yeah, it is. I did find it quite a tricky question because I wanted to say, well, when in my long life? At what point are you asking me about this? But I think what I came to in the end is that I wish that I'd had more confidence in my views. I think I wasn't a natural academic, and therefore I worked a lot from instinct. Mm-hmm. And only as I studied later in life, I would find a name for what I had thought instinctively. But because it was instinctive, I didn't always feel I had the courage of my convictions. And we were talking earlier about qualifications, and one of the main drivers to do a PhD was because I would stand at a conference and people would basically say, well, who are you to say that? That's going against the grain and we can dismiss you. So I wish that I had known more about neurology particularly, but mainly I wish that I'd had more confidence to really sort of stand my ground rather than, not being as brave as I would have liked to have been.
Yeah, I can see how it can be hard where, maybe your convictions or your confidence can be knocked if people are saying, well, you need to have, certain letters in front of your name to be heard. But that self-belief is so important I think in all the practice that we do across different sectors, especially that you've worked in. And I know today we're talking specifically around dysregulation, neurodivergence, but focusing on children and adults, but how our strategies can benefit everyone, not just the neurodivergent individual. But I do have a first question in mind, and listeners will know that I often ask quite obvious questions at the start, but I'm interested in the obvious because I think the word dysregulation is used an awful lot. And I think some people have slightly different meanings of what it is, what it means. So I just wondered if we could start there and just think about what we actually mean with dysregulation, particularly in the context of neurodivergent children and adults.
Yeah, of course, every child can be dysregulated, very often because they're hungry or they're tired, they're bored. But I feel like dysregulation is much more likely if you are grappling with an environment that does not suit you, that is not designed for you. And I prefer, I suppose, the term dysregulation to something that is more negative, such as challenging behaviour, which is a term that I really don't like at all, because as I know you advocate, behaviour is communication,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to see that what a child is doing or an adult is a way of saying to you, right now I'm really struggling with something. And that is what you're seeing is that dysregulation. At that point, you can then think, right, I think of it like a playing detective. What is going on in this situation that is causing that dysregulation? Is it me? Is it the environment? Whatever it is, I want the responsible adult to feel like they have the agency, the understanding to try to figure that out so that they're working collaboratively with the child. They're
Mm-hmm.
showing that they notice the dysregulation. So something seems to be upsetting you right now. Let's work together to see what we can do about that. Because there's no point in continuing if somebody is dysregulated. That's obviously not the ideal for learning. It's going to block learning.
Yeah, and when we're in that dysregulated state, child, adult, it's really hard to take on any information or even to hear what the person next to you is saying because you're in that state. When we say that everyone can benefit from Team Teach training, we really do mean everyone. Our in-house training puts the emphasis on the unique needs of your setting and creates a consistent approach to behaviour across your entire organisation. Head over to the Team Teach website to find out more. And just picking up on a bit that you said there about the world not necessarily being set up to help neurodivergent individuals to succeed, I wondered if you could say a bit more about that and how that would affect dysregulation, I guess, even more with those children and adults.
Okay, so thinking about a typical classroom, a neurotypical child would probably notice an unpleasant smell, would probably be bothered by a humming noise from a projector, but the amount of energy and effort it would take them to ignore those and to direct their focus where it needs to be is so much less than a neurodivergent person. So, and in all environments, unless they're very, very carefully managed, will be causing a level of struggle with attention, struggle with focus that blocks engagement. And that is always going to mean that the neurodivergent person is working harder, using more energy, and therefore, I would argue, needs more understanding and compassion because you can't see that additional struggle. You have to know that it's likely and you have to check in whether it's likely, not just expect that they're going to deal in the same ways as their classmates who are not having that struggle. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does perfectly. It's such a visceral response and answer as well. And I think about myself actually training yesterday. I'm dyslexic and we had a big air conditioning unit on. Honestly, it sounded like, I don't know, like a sports car in the room roaring. And it wasn't until it went off that I realized like the concentration to block out the sound and to be able to listen to other things was immense. And I was just like, oof, I'm doing a mime of my head down for the listener. But I see that with children in the classroom, maybe adults, teachers that might be neurodivergent as well, having to deal with all the background noise and things going on, that takes its toll. And I think about that phrase burnout that we kind of moot around quite a bit. But I can see from that response that burnout is just going to happen quicker for those individuals that are having to work so hard to kind of stay regulated or block out certain things.
Yes. And I think that it would be very likely in that situation, and definitely my experience is that it happens, that people feel very alone in that, very misunderstood. And the the people like to talk about resilience, which is another problematic term,
Yeah.
but it is it's almost like their efforts are not noticed and not rewarded, and therefore it's very likely that over time they will get eroded. And you will have children arriving at school knowing it's going to be almost impossible for them to get through even one lesson
Mm.
without feeling completely overwhelmed. And that's so, it's just such a sad thing to think that that is what's happening. Whereas if we were more aware, all of us who are in a school environment, if we're always more aware and we can, maybe we can't turn the projector off, but we can say to the child, is that bothering you? Okay, I understand. Let's sit you as far away from it as we can. What can we give you and help you with to give you some respite from that? Do you need to stand outside the classroom for a few minutes? Let me know when that's needed. Just that collaboration and compassion again to show that you're with the child. I think that would make an enormous difference.
I think so. And then I was kind of turning that on its head in my own head about how we might respond to colleagues. So if you're in a staff meeting and you can see that someone maybe is struggling, I don't know, in the heat, for example, and other people aren't, we are probably quite likely to be quite compassionate to another staff member, another adult with ease. Like it comes naturally, like, oh, are you okay? Like, what's going on here? Like, can I get you a fan? But then I don't know what happens when we kind of turn it around to children in a classroom setting. It seems harder to access that compassion. I just wondered if that's kind of been your experience and where the kind of disparity might come from.
Ah, absolutely. I really agree with you. I think it's from maybe a certain level of anxiety in an educator who has a role, which means that they're in charge, they're meant to be in control, they're meant to be able to keep everybody safe. And when somebody is challenging that, I think that feels like an assault on their role. So it's not, we don't naturally jump to, oh dear, what's wrong? Partly because there's not space in it, partly because how are you going to deal with 30, oh no, what's wrong? It can feel really, really, really demanding in a way that people are not prepared for, I think. And you also, in an adult situation in the staff room, you can have a basic level of trust that that person is going to say, oh, I'm okay, or can we just open the window? There'll be a sort of fairly simple solution.
Mhm.
But with a child, maybe there's a lot of fear around how am I going to deal with whatever comes out of this question? Maybe it's something I can't fix. And then you just go back into your training and your expectation that they must follow the rules, they must behave this way. That's their role. My role is to enforce it.
Yeah, I feel like asking the question to the child, the metaphor, like it opens up a can of worms and the fear of that
Mm,
being opened and kind of not knowing how to cope with it. And I think about teacher training, perhaps, and I know that you mentioned this a bit off air to me, and about whether staff are prepared for those moments to be compassionate and not kind of just go down a line of expectations, rules, which have their place, of course, but we can do all of that compassionately. And I wondered about the training of teachers and whether teachers are prepared for these moments of dysregulation and how we can support them more.
mm. Um, yeah, I was saying to you that I feel very frustrated with teacher training. I know less about the preparation for those sorts of moments. I know where my frustration is with how little content there is that would give teachers insight into what dysregulated behaviour occurs. Yeah, I think teachers, even if there is some sort of discussion within their training and mentoring around how you respond, it's enormously difficult to tap into a compassionate stance with a child who, like we know most exclusions are for persistent disruptive behaviour, which can be so minor, but I understand it really niggles, it really gets to you. And dealing with that from several children at once, the frustration of that. This is why I wanted to really think about compassion within classrooms, within schools as a whole, because I think that it's so difficult to tap into it when you've got so much else that you're trying to manage. And I have a feeling, and I'm really not sure about this, that some teachers will do it very much more naturally, and those that fall back on strength and power and rule to try to get order in their classroom, it will be much harder for them to find a different way. And I think the training is so brief. There's so little time in the process. If you're only training for a year and all the emphasis is on communicating your subject and delivering results, how are you going to have space? Because for me, like this is an ongoing process to really get to that view, that vision, and that ability to stop yourself from your initial reaction to, that kid is so annoying, and to calm down and think, what's going on for them? So I think it's just such a tall order for teachers, but I also think it's really essential for the students.
I think it really is. And I know in your book, you get across a theme that we can be compassionate by thinking that the children in our classrooms, in our services, are doing the best they can in that moment.
In my previous work, I had a lot of experience working with nonverbal, mainly autistic students and those with severe learning difficulties. And that was very challenging in many ways. It was often very difficult to find a way to engage students in anything that was not their choice and that was maybe purposeful. And I had to learn that the way that they might refuse to access something that I wanted them to access was it had a purpose and a meaning to them, and I had to really engage with that and respect that in order to bring them more towards me in terms of what we might do. And building up a relationship was a very time-consuming process. But little by little, with even the most reticent learners, they would begin to move towards me and find engagement and fun and joy in what we might do together. And so my understanding of they're always trying to get to that place. There are just so many things blocking their access. That to me says they're always doing their best. And I believe that every child would love to get the most out of an education, would love to go to school happy every day, would love to have friends, to learn, to feel that deep engagement with material that really feels meaningful to them. I don't believe that any child doesn't want that. And therefore, for me, at every point where I'm feeling irritated, where somebody might have just maybe hit me or bitten me, which has happened on occasion, I have to pause and think, okay, what's going on? Because this is the way that I feel is that this is my fault. I've just done something wrong to make the child need to do that. And that's not to take blame. It's not about blaming, it's about agency. If it was me that made the error, then I can fix the error and we can get back on track.
No, I understand that concept perfectly. And I think that in my experience in my career working with neurodivergent individuals that become dysregulated, that when something does happen, I go through the same process. Okay, what is it that I've done? What can I change to change the outcome next time? And it's not that the behavior is okay as well. There might be some kind of boundaries around it, but also inspecting, being curious around why it occurred, how it occurred, and what I can do differently to change things. And then I'm thinking about that phrase that you've got, they're doing the best they can in that moment. And I do try and apply that to myself as well. Because when things have gone terribly wrong, as they do, I can accept that I have done the best I could do in that moment as well. So I do think it kind of works both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important for the staff as well. And then when we have that view, I think it allows us um, to introspect, but also to apologize, to also, again, going back to this collaborative, oh, I'm so sorry I said that in that way, that I can see that wasn't helpful. Let's reset. Let me try and get it right for you. And then again, people will feel safer, feel more cared for, feel more respected, and will join us, be more willing to join us in our space, not feel so frightened and resistant, which is what I think is happening to lots of children are coming into to school or refusing to go to school because they're so frightened
Mm.
of what is going to be happening in that day and how alone they might feel in trying to deal with very difficult challenges.
Yeah, and I don't know the statistics offhand, but the amount of kind of emotional based school avoidance with
Mm.
neurodivergent children, I don't even need to look up the statistics exactly. It's going to be extremely high.
Yeah.
um and that is it's such a challenge, and I really see how we can harness that compassion to be compassionate to ourselves, but also being curious and trying to understand what's going on for the child in their dysregulation. And it's tough at the moment in the school sector in particular, I
Mm.
think, to hold that compassionate approach, meet all the targets and things that are
Mm.
going on, the very, I don't know, ambitious curriculum, etc. as well. I can see that practitioners are having to hold quite a lot. Um, I guess I just wondered, just for our last bit, and I know that we've talked about compassion and about how we can apply it, but I wondered a bit about a couple of practical things around that compassion and about how we can use an emotional tone, and how we can use our language in that moment where we have that child that's dysregulated, and how we might practically apply some of those things.
I think that makes me think a lot about teacher attitude and
Mm.
teacher identity. And that links to educator confidence as well.
Hmm.
That when I see really effective educators, they do have a relationship with their pupils, which is often based in humour.
Hmm.
It's based in maybe a bit of teasing, but there are clear boundaries to how far you go with that. It it's based in knowing the child and remembering things about them and letting them know. I'm thinking of a particular head teacher who was into football and knew which clubs the kids supported and then would tease them about the results at the weekend. Just a very kind of light-hearted, personal, where students felt seen.
Hmm.
And then I think that opens the adults up as people. So
Hmm.
they're not just scary authority figures that you have to um, that you have to do what they say because they're in charge. They're people who care about you and who want the best for you. And therefore, if they give you an instruction, you can take it as something more helpful.
Mm.
So I think it's having the confidence to be warm and friendly, knowing that there are still clear expectations and boundaries around what will be permissible, and being able to very gently say to a child, just, be careful when you go that far, that might not really work in this context, just rein it back in a bit. So
Hmm.
it's never, oh, you got that wrong. It's never blaming or dismissing. And the fundamental to me is that all adults see themselves as having a growing learning process, but that they are working with children, even if they're 18. They are unfully formed, they're not fully formed adults, they're young people who are still in that process of learning. And they should be treated like that. When that's where a lot of things go wrong, I think, because they look physically mature and then our expectations of them are unrealistic for what we know about the brain, know about neurology and what's going on for them at the time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I guess we have to have that connection and that relationship. And there isn't a, okay, magically use this tone, use this language when someone's dysregulated. It's actually all the building blocks that you do before over time of building that connection relationship to then be able to gently say, oh, how about trying it this way? And then that gets met perhaps with a want from the child to do that because that connection and relationships there. And I think
Yes.
that makes such a difference, I think.
Yeah, because I think there are so many ways of getting it right. And what I've always felt is that if I've gone on a training course to learn a particular way of working, but it really doesn't suit who I am as a person, I might take elements of it, but not want to
Yeah.
deliver it wholeheartedly. I'm not very extroverted. I'm not very good at performance. So if it's that kind of basis, then I will shy away from it. But I have my ways of making relationships with young people that really works for me. I've got my sense of humor,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I don't think we can have a language except that obviously a gentle tone, a care, a caring that isn't only when they're dysregulated, a caring that's across the board.
Mm-hmm.
So many teachers are able to convey that in so many different ways, and you can be not very humorous, maybe you very intense about your subject, but you still manage to build a relationship with students which shows that you are interested in them and their learning, and so
Mm-hmm.
they feel it's this whole feeling about being well, school belonging, which is such a big topic,
Yeah.
but feeling understood, welcomed, included, supported, and that everybody's gunning for you, not wanting you out of the classroom because you're a pain.
Yeah. That belonging and feeling part of and being included. And I'm thinking about a teacher, Clare Boyle, who I used to work with in a pupil referral unit, maths teacher. I would say that the kids respected her greatly, and she by far was the most amazing teacher I've ever experienced. But if I ever did a lesson observation with her, like a peer observation, I could never use any of the strategies or anything that she used because she is like the absolute opposite of me. But we would have similar outcomes, but
Mm,
just a completely different style. But both, I would say, had a real compassionate approach to the children, but just like different ways of approaching it. And I think that's so important in our practitioners that we can have that ability to bring ourselves into the room, to be truly part of those relationships and connections with our children and young people. I wondered, Anne, we've covered a lot of ground there, and it was like super interesting to talk to you about it. But I just wondered if you could finish up with 3 top tips on the topic.
yes. What I would say to any educator is understand as much as you can about how typical brains work, but then what differences are likely to occur when children have experienced adverse childhood experiences, trauma, or they're neurodivergent. And that's where I would be really wanting teacher training to change, to have more of that focus. And then I would really wish that we could have systems, schools, classrooms, as systems that allowed flexibility and that were not working on equality, everybody must have the same, but more equity, everybody must have what they need. And lastly, what I said before about, to me, it's so important to see that this young person before you, even if they're 6'4", they are in the process of learning and becoming the person that they'll be, that you have so much influence over that. And when you treat them with kindness and fairness and compassion, you are going to be really, really helping them to achieve. And I'm sure that anybody working in this field, that's what they want. But it's reminding yourself constantly, they're not fully formed. I am here to guide and support them in becoming that. That I think will help people stay more compassionate.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anne, today. Genuinely, I've really enjoyed our back and forth and learning a bit more about the approaches that you've put into place over the years. And thanks so much for coming on, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Team Teach podcast. It's been great to have you here with us as we discuss behaviour, communication, and the ways we can best support those in our care. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.